Hi guys, I'm on chapter 15, A Ghostly Secret. Amy wasn't surprised to see Aunt Claire appear in the kitchen while the girls were eating breakfast. She was too energetic to stay in bed when everyone else was up. Have you had orange juice? There's no tomato juice too, if you'd rather. Or apricot. Amy, did you make plenty of toast? We're fine. I thought you were going to sleep late this morning, Amy teased. I couldn't. I say I'm going to, but I always wake up early. On my last job, Aunt Claire looked wistful. I was up at 6:30 every morning to make my connection on the elevated. Saturdays and Sundays, when I could have slept late, I woke up promptly at 6:30 just the same and stared at the ceiling for half an hour trying to convince myself I was enjoying the rest. I'm a morning person and I might as well accept it. Have you had cereal? And bananas, and orange marmalade, and grape jelly, and raspberry jam. Amy was babbling. Ever since she got up, she'd been chattering, giggling, hurrying Luann, discussing the party with Ellen, anything to keep from thinking about what happened in the attic last night. Aunt Claire plugged in the coffee pot and put a slice of bread into the toaster. What are you going to do this beautiful morning, besides talk about who said what at the party? Of course. We're going for a hike to Rainbow Falls, Ellen replied eagerly. We were going to bike there last Saturday, but my aunt and uncle came from Chicago. Good idea. Aunt Claire flicked a questioning glance at Luann, who was spreading a thick layer of jam on her toast. Luann's going with us? Amy felt rather than saw Ellen's look of surprise. She likes to hike, don't you, Luann? I like to hike, Luann agreed. Or else I want to go up and watch the poor dolly. We'll take sandwiches, Amy said quickly. What do you want, Luann? She could hardly wait to get her sister out of the house. Luann knew she wasn't supposed to talk about the dollhouse, but the temptation was great. Peanut butter and pickles. Ellen? Anything. Well, just take whatever you want. Aunt Claire sounded relieved that there were to be no arguments about Luann would do. Later, when Ellen had gone upstairs to make the beds, taking Luann as a helper, Aunt Claire said, Your friends are really, really good with Luann. Not always. Amy busied herself, slicing cheese and spreading peanut butter. I've had friends who were really awful to her. She scares them, I guess, but Kathy Sells was terrific last night, and after a while, everyone else copied the way she acted. Ellen, too, I guess. I still think Ellen backed out of our bike ride last Saturday because of Luann, she added. Then it's especially nice of you to take Luann along today, Aunt Claire said. I hope it won't be a burden for you. That word again. Amy wondered why it bothered her so much. After all, she certainly let Aunt Claire know Luann was a burden at the mall last Friday afternoon. But she's my sister. She wanted to say, not just my burden, she sighed. There was no easy way to explain her feelings, but she couldn't even explain them herself. It wasn't until they were out of the house and walking down the country road that Amy relaxed. A warm sun pressed against her shoulders and backs of her knees, and the breeze ruffled her hair. This is great, she murmured. Now, if Luann would just forget what happened last night. The poor dolly cried, Luann announced. The books fell down. Luann never forgot anything except warnings to be quiet. What dolly? What books? Ellen looked at Luann curiously. The dolly in the dollhouse. She cried and cried. Ellen turned to Amy. Does she mean the dollhouse? Amy nodded. Lying in bed that morning before the others woke up, she realized that she probably wasn't going to be able to keep the secret of the dollhouse to herself after all. Not now, with Luann knowing what she did. Besides, she really needed to talk about it to her friend. The whole thing was just becoming too scary. Luann went up to the attic after we were all asleep last night, Amy said slowly. I woke up and went after her. As briefly as possible, she described their adventure, then went on to tell Ellen about the strange things that had happened on previous nights. I can't talk about it to Aunt Claire, she finished. The dollhouse really upsets her. She was furious when she thought I moved the dolls around to act out the murders. She shuddered. As if I would. But you'll have to tell her, Luann protested, eyes wide. It's her dollhouse, after all. Amy shook her head. She reached for Luann's hand and drew her farther over onto the shoulder of the road. She wouldn't believe me. The thing is, I think the ghost, she gulped over the words and hurried on, is trying to tell us something about the murders maybe, and Aunt Claire doesn't want to think about them or talk about them. If I don't find out what the secret is, no one ever will. A ghostly secret, Ellen's eyes shone. Amy, that's the most exciting, most scary thing I've ever heard. I don't know how you could keep quiet about it. What are you going to do? I don't know. This morning I thought about telling my dad, but he wanted to see for himself, and then Aunt Claire would know. She probably ordered us all out of the house. Maybe we should go back to the library and read some more about the murders." Amy shrugged. "I have a feeling we wouldn't find anything much." "Maybe we can." She was suddenly tired of thinking about a problem that seemed to have an answer. "Maybe we can just wait to see what happens, and today we can have a good time and forget about it. Come on, you two." Luann raced you to the park entrance. Amy dashed ahead. In a moment, Ellen was caught up to her, and she could hear Luann's heavier steps close behind. They all reached the park gate together. You're a good runner, Luann," Ellen panted as they slowed to a walk. "And you know something? You're the bravest person I know. I never would have gone up in the attic by myself in the middle of the night." Luann looked puzzled. "Why not?" she asked earnestly. "I wouldn't want to run into a ghost." "I don't run into anything," Luann said smugly. "When I run, I just run." And away she went, leaning into the wind, leaving her companions far behind. It was a perfect day for the picnic. The girls waded into the shallows of the Rainbow River and sent sticks hurtling over the falls. They had their sandwiches on flat rock overlooking the water, and the afternoon they chased a cracked frisbee Ellen found under a brush. "Your sister is really fast," Ellen said. Luann continued throwing and pursuing the frisbee after Amy and Ellen had collapsed on the grass. "You know those Special Olympics, the ones for kids like Luann? She ought to be in that." Amy considered. "I don't think my mom would like it much." "Why not? Luann would love it." She doesn't like to admit Luann is different. Amy wasn't in the mood to talk about the problem either. "Our minister believes in ghosts," Ellen said after a few minutes of silence. "How do you know?" He said things that happened that we can't explain. And if you see something like that, you should feel lucky, not afraid, because most people never have the experience. "I'd be afraid," she asked honestly. "I bet he would too," Amy said. "I bet he wouldn't feel so lucky up there in that attic with the ghost crying and lights going on and off and dolls moving." She lay back, squinting in the sun. Grown-ups would make a lesson out of anything. At 3 o'clock, they gathered up their belongings, leaving the frisbee on a picnic table for someone else to enjoy. Ellen's mother had said she would be at Aunt Claire's house at 4. "This was a fun day," Ellen exclaimed as they left the park. "When we moved to Claiborne, I didn't know anybody, and now I have a best friend, just like Sissy said when she was telling my fortune." "I'm glad it's you, Amy." She turned to Luann, who was listening intently. "You're a good friend too, Luann." Amy wished later that their day could have ended right there, but as they turned out of the yard into the old house, they saw Aunt Claire sitting on the top step of the porch. Her face had a dark, closed-up look, and she barely nodded in response to the girls' hellos. "Your mother called. She's on her way, Ellen," she said abruptly. "She wants you to be ready because she's in a hurry. Are you all packed?" "Yes." Ellen looked at Amy. "What's the matter, Aunt Claire?" Amy asked. "What's wrong?" Her aunt glared at them. "I'm sure if you think about it, you'll know very well what's the matter. We'll talk later." Her voice was with rage. "I'll get my suitcase," Ellen said and hurried inside. But I don't know what's wrong," Amy insisted. "We'll talk about it when Ellen is gone," Aunt Claire said tightly. "There's already been far too much talk in front of strangers." They sat in silence on the steps until the crunch of the tires on the gravel announced Miss Kramer's approach. Ellen must have been waiting and watching from an upstairs window, for as soon as the car turned into the yard, her footsteps sounded on the stairs. She came outside on tiptoe and closed the door gently behind her as if someone were ill. "Thank you for the lovely party, Miss Traylor," she said. "It was really nice. See you Monday, Amy." Amy nodded, too upset to speak. "Bye, Luann. Bye, everybody." Ellen jumped into the car and was gone. "How dare you!" The words cut like a blade across the chirping, buzzing peace of the late afternoon. Amy swung around her face at her aunt. "How could you gossip about our family to all those girls? I can't forgive you for that." "Amy, I told you how I felt about you putting the dolls up in the rooms where they were murdered, and yet you went right up there and did it again last night, in front of everyone. You don't care how I feel." So that was it. Aunt Claire had been in the attic, and she looked at the dollhouse. "I went up to put Ellen's blanket away, and there was the house standing open in the way you left it last night, and the dolls were in the bedroom and the parlor again. On the desk? Oh, Amy, that's the worst. What were you doing? Putting on a play for your friends? I just can't believe you can be so insensitive." "The desk?" "You know what I'm talking about. The desk in the parlor was moved over the front door. You must have read about that when when you and Ellen went poking through the newspapers looking for all the grisly details after Grandma Trailer ran downstairs to the parlor with Paul. And she pushed the desk against the door to try and keep the killer out. It didn't stop him, but she tried. The desk is there in front of the parlor door now, right where you put it. I didn't. Amy was suddenly angry too, and Aunt Claire had no reason to assume she was guilty without giving her a chance to explain. I didn't touch the dolls after we put them back in the box the other night. You were there and you saw me do it. And I didn't touch the desk either. Aunt Claire clenched her fists in exasperation. Amy, this is terrible. Why must you lie to me? You did move them, you or Ellen. There's no other explanation. Don't yell at Amy. Luann was on her feet at the foot of the steps. Amy doesn't lie. I don't like you. And I don't like being lied to, Aunt Claire snapped. Sit down, Luann. I am talking to your sister. I saw the poor dolly, Luann shouted. I heard the dolly cry. What in the world are you talking about? The poor dolly. Aunt Claire knew what she had to do. She struggled to keep her voice steady. I didn't move the dolls when I was up there last week. I didn't move them yesterday. Neither did Ellen. Something really strange is happening in the dollhouse. The parlor lights up all by itself, and the dolls move around. I saw the grandmother doll moving. I did. She turned away from her aunt's disbelieving eyes and hurried on. Last night, Luann went up there right after we were asleep, and I went to look for her. The house was open again, and there was a light, and she took a deep breath. There was crying coming from the parlor, and some of the little books fell off the shelves, all by themselves. I saw them. The books fell down, Luann said in the silence that followed. Amy waited for the explosion that was sure to follow her story. She hadn't wanted to tell, but Aunt Claire had forced her to do it. When the silence stretched out, she looked up and saw that Aunt Claire had buried her head in her arms. Her thin shoulders shook with sobs. Amy scrambled up the steps and laid a timid hand on her aunt's arm. I'm sorry, I didn't want to tell you. I wasn't going to ever tell you because I knew you'd hate it. Please don't cry. Aunt Claire didn't answer. Gradually, her sobs became softer, but she didn't lift her head. She seemed to have forgotten Amy and Luann were there. Aunt Claire, you better leave me alone for a while. The words were muffled. Amy signaled to Luann. We'll be inside, she said. Come on, Luann. They were in the foyer, looking at each other in bewilderment when Aunt Claire spoke again. I'd like to believe you wouldn't lie to me, she said tiredly. But if you're telling the truth, if there's restless, unhappy spirit haunting this place, that's even worse because it means what I've always expected and it's true. I can't bear that.